Marshal Ren Vox stood rigid on the bridge of the Dominion flagship Zeveron Wrath, his ornate helm glinting under the cold latticework lights. Before him, a pale anomaly drifted through Varn Sector Delta, a vessel shaped unlike any known hull, configuration, smooth, rounded, and absurdly small. Vox narrowed his eyes, his voice layered with ceremonial venom. Identify it. The scanners fed back nothing useful. No known species, no Dominion registration, no hailing protocol, no fear signature, just a lazy orbit and an annoyingly confident broadcast. Heya, Captain Mira Lang of the Sol Unity Corps. First time in the neighborhood? Mind if I park for a bit? Vox blinked. The bridge fell silent. Is that humor? Someone whispered. Humor during a breach? Vox gave the order to intercept. But by the time the Wrath's destroyers had mobilized, the vessel had adjusted course, matching their velocity precisely, mimicking their formations with eerie ease. Its shields shimmered, not under pressure, but seemingly out of boredom. When Mira Lang finally allowed a visual feed, she appeared mid-sip from a mug that read, Diplomancer, like a normal captain but cooler. Her ship's interior looked like a trendy Earth cafe. You folks got decent Wi-Fi out here, or is it all just sacred relics and weirdly quiet corridors? Vox, a traditionalist through and through, nearly choked on his own breath. A diplomatic breach, a technological anomaly, a philosophical affront. Mira offered to come aboard Wrath for tea, her tea, naturally. She arrived with 0 escorts, no weapons, and an expression that said she'd already won something nobody else had noticed yet. Love what you've done with the place, she said to Vox, admiring the crystalline floor tiles. Very villain lair chic, Vox ordered. A full psychic scan. It returned disturbing results. No hostility, no fear, but a swirling mass of curiosity, defiance, and confidence wrapped in humor. The Dominion had protocols for war, terrorism, biocontagion, even mutiny. They had none for whatever this was. Mira, it turned out, was a diplomat explorer representing the Sol Unity Corps, a founding member of something called the Fractal Accord, which no one in the Dominion's entire historical index had ever heard of. She said things like, we're sort of a crowd-sourced civilization, and we don't really do empires. Too much laundry. She wore no armor, carried no banners, and declined formal rituals with the phrase, hard pass, but thanks, for the offer. Against Dominion doctrine, she was escorted to Citadel Vecron, the imperial heart of ceremony and law, where she presented her gifts, seeds of extinct earth plants, digital jazz archives, and holograms of humans doing stand-up comedy about galactic dictatorships. In return, the Dominion offered sermons, cold metal halls, and veiled threats with choreographed pauses. Lord Magistrate Saroon, bloated with ceremonial title and drenched in 17 layers of silk-threaded armor, attempted to dominate the first formal meeting. In the name of the core flame and the eternal ritual, he began. Mira raised a hand. Sorry, just to check. Are we doing an actual TED Talk or is this foreplay? The translator hesitated, paused, translated anyway. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Mira just sipped wine from a vacuum-sealed thermos with her legs crossed. Surveillance records would later show that multiple junior officials smiled, and then immediately looked guilty about it. When questioned about her intent, Mira simply replied, I'm not here to take over. I'm just here to hang out until somebody asks why they're not allowed to think. By then, her vessel had already begun seeding passive signals into the Dominion's communication lattice, non-aggressive nanobots disguised as ambient info dust. Dominion engineers couldn't decrypt the signals, but they knew one thing. They were learning. And worse, the Dominion's younger minds were beginning to question why someone like Mira, non-conforming, chaotic, funny, made more sense than the doctrines they'd memorized since hatching. Inside Vecron's silent spires, beneath layers of ritual and secrecy, a tremor had begun. It did not come from force. It came from a single woman with a mug, a laugh, and no apparent need to kneel. The Dominion had faced fleets. They'd survived assassins. They had never encountered something like Mira Lang, a patient, smiling contagion of freedom. Citadel Vacron had never hosted someone quite like Captain Mira Lang, and the realization was starting to ferment like a bad cask of ceremonial nectar. Every corridor she walked through rippled with unease, guards straightening unnecessarily, aides whispering behind golden masks, sensors quietly recalibrating to track her unregulated anomaly field. Mira, for her part, simply wandered. She visited the Dominion's central archive, requested a visitor's pass with a smile, and then proceeded to correct several historical inaccuracies in their depiction of the so-called proto-savage expansion, casually pointing out that Earth had never even been in that quadrant. "Maybe your ancient records got hacked by a satirical AI," she suggested, straight-faced, to a bewildered archivist. The Dominion's leadership, a chorus of high-caste traditionalists wrapped in chrome silk and stifling etiquette, debated, her fate behind walls that hummed with surveillance and incense. Some wanted her detained, studied, neutralized. Surely no species could actually be this irreverent without hiding something. Others, particularly younger counselors and junior thinkers, were quietly fascinated. In chambers carved from obsidian and tradition, Mira was described in hushed tones not as an enemy, but as a question. Meanwhile, Mira upped the ante. She sent out invitations for a cultural exchange soiree in her ship's lounge, complete with fusion cuisine, rotating live holograms of galactic music styles, and a stand-up performance entitled "So Your Empire Runs on Ritual," delivered by a very sarcastic AI named Frank. Mira greeted the stunned guests in a flowing jacket made from Varn silks repurposed into a bohemian trench coat, and opened the event by toasting, "To bridges, not walls." And to the wonderful irony of drinking ceremonial nectar from a cocktail glass. The event sent shockwaves through the Dominion. More shocking than her refusal to kneel was her casual demonstration of technology light years beyond theirs, quantum. Projectors embedded in jewelry, linguistic programs that translated not just words but intent, and a fabric scanner that healed minor wounds while you waited in line for appetizers. And then there were the gifts. Seeds engineered to thrive in metal-rich soil, climate-stable crops that could survive dust storms, educational archives containing fractal learning structures that reshaped with the user's intellect. "We figured trade was a nice icebreaker," Mira explained. "You know, before I accidentally upend your worldview." One of her attendees, Director Anel Vare, Dominion Chief Xenopsychologist, began to question more than just her presence. The woman was either a genius of psychological subversion or something far more dangerous, genuine. Anel quietly began shadowing Mira's interactions, measuring Dominion citizens' responses, tracking subtle shifts in speech patterns and emotional registers. The results were disturbing. Exposure to Mira Lang correlated directly with a measurable reduction in obedience-based stress responses, especially among low-rank personnel. Mira didn't need to preach. Her mere presence was causing Dominion society to relax. That terrified Anal and intrigued her. Meanwhile, Mira continued her grand tour like a tourist with a diplomatic badge. She visited the Vault of Ascendant Laws and commented, "This much marble for a constitution? You folks really don't believe in editing." She offered to update their software protocols during a tour of the Grand Relay Nexus. "You've got a 400-year-old packet bottleneck." "Here," she muttered, rerouting one of their data flows with a finger swipe on her handheld. Security froze. She smiled. "Oops, fixed it." That night, she was summoned to an emergency closed session with Lord Magistrate Saroon, flanked by two silent enforcers. The magistrate, red-faced and radiating offense, threw down a scroll etched in gold. "You violated Dominion Law 882B, unauthorized technical interference in sacred systems." Mira leaned back, brow raised. "Oh, that. You're welcome, by the way. Your comms latency was giving me second-hand anxiety." Saroon thundered, You mock our sacred infrastructure. She sipped from her thermos. If your infrastructure can't survive a software patch, maybe it needs a little mocking. Behind Saroon, one of the enforcers stifled a laugh. Mira caught it. So did Saroon. The old guard was cracking, and not from a hammer, but from the slow, insistent drip of humor, logic, and proof of a better way. The Dominion had faced rebellions before. Violent, desperate, ideological ones. They had always crushed them. But this was something different. Mira wasn't asking for change. She was making normal look wildly more appealing. For the first time in living memory, people inside the Dominion were starting to imagine alternatives. Not just to policy, to the whole damn system. And Mira? She was just getting started. Citadel Vecron, once the crown jewel of Dominion supremacy, now pulsed with something alien and disquieting, possibility. The air no longer carried the sterile weight of ritual certainty, but had begun to buzz with half-suppressed laughter, unspoken questions, and the faint pulse of forbidden music drifting from private rooms where Mira's cultural data packages had been copied and shared in secret. Dominion officials blamed solar static for the strange signal disruptions. Mira knew better. Her ship, the Eventide Whisper, had already completed its secondary phase, a low-impact infiltration campaign disguised entirely as a diplomatic gift exchange. Inside government towers, ornaments were quietly decoding encrypted bursts of subversive media, animations, open-source ideologies, neural algorithms that taught abstract philosophy using knock-knock jokes. All of it crafted not to dominate, but to unstick the minds of a people too long conditioned to obey. Mira herself moved like a contagion through Varn society, attending every function she was invited to, and even more she wasn't. She slipped into the high temple of law under the guise of cultural observation and left behind a glowing orb that projected holographic graffiti in multiple dialects. Why obey when you could improvise? The priests nearly collapsed from doctrinal whiplash. Meanwhile, the Dominion's security ministry, desperate to diagnose the cause of increasing morale fluctuations and minor bureaucratic insurrections, launched internal investigations. But it was too late. Mira had already mapped the internal fracture. Points. Junior archivists who had started cross-referencing Dominion history with her data archives and found holes big enough to drive denial through. Low-ranking caste workers who whispered that maybe the ritual of daily devotion wasn't spiritually enriching so much as time-consuming and pointless. And younger strategists in the Dominion's Tactical Academy who found Mira's debriefs on non-hierarchical combat coordination oddly efficient. Even Marshal Ren Vox, once the stern face of Dominion military might, now kept Mira's gift, a book entitled How to Command Without Being a Jackass, on his desk, officially unopened but worn at the corners. He had grown quiet in meetings, watching Mira from afar like a man staring into a mirror that showed him not who he was, but who he might have been. Director N.L. Vare was the first high-ranking official to break ranks. It wasn't dramatic, no fiery speeches or defiant declarations. One morning she simply showed up at Mira's vessel in civilian robes, holding a bottle of Varn root wine and asking, "Do humans believe in second chances?" Mira welcomed her aboard with a grin and an espresso. The defection sent silent shockwaves through the Dominion. Anil had been one of their minds, one of their elite, and now she was teaching Mira's crew how to better translate emotional resonance across species. She wasn't betraying her people, she explained in her quiet, logical tone. She was liberating them from a thought cage too tight to breathe in. The Dominion's elite panicked. Emergency meetings were convened inside thought-shielded war rooms, but even those chambers echoed with Mira's virus. Doubt. She hadn't overthrown their system. She had simply outperformed it in real time, with a ship that could appear in multiple places at once, jokes that dismantled pride, and a philosophy that worked without terror. Plans were drawn, options considered. Should Mira be detained, assassinated, discredited? But every solution raised a deeper fear. What if removing her only made her message stronger? What if martyrdom finished what presence had started? Meanwhile, Mira sat with her crew in the lounge of the Eventide Whisper, reviewing data pulses and sipping tea, while holograms of Dominion citizens appeared in her feed, some anonymous, some brave enough to show their faces, asking questions. What is freedom like? Is cooperation always chaotic? Can laughter really be safe? She answered them all. She never preached. She never threatened. She just listened, shared, and made them laugh at the absurdity of a regime that scanned citizens for ritualistic contamination if they smiled at the wrong moment. And in doing so, she lit quiet fires across the Dominion. Fires in minds, not streets. Changes in posture, in tone, in the way people paused before they bowed. Hesitations, not rebellions. Yet. The Varn Dominion's greatest strength had always been its fear-fueled stability. But now, under the quiet pressure of Mira's campaign, that stability was no longer rigid. It was brittle. It bent under the weight of questions it could not answer. And Mira, still smiling, still calm, understood that the true revolution didn't require a single shot, just a single moment when enough people stopped being afraid and laughed instead. That moment was almost here. Citadel Vecron's grand dome, once a monument to Dominion immutability, now shimmered with the tremors of a civilization unspooling from within. Beneath its layers of gilded latticework, the high chamber convened, in urgent secrecy, cloaked in the perfumed smog of incense and the heavy silence of uncertainty. The chamber's acoustics, engineered over centuries to amplify solemnity, did little to mask the discord in the room. Half the council wanted Mira Lang expelled, erased, or quietly vaporized. The other half wanted to hear her speak again. No votes were cast, no rituals recited. Just silence, broken by the occasional nervous glance toward the outer balconies, where junior aides now whispered in clusters, instead of standing rigidly at attention. Mira had been summoned, again, and this time not under the guise of courtesy. She entered alone, her signature grin tempered by something harder, quieter. She wore no symbols of power, no tactical armor, no alliance crest. Just a simple navy coat over practical boots and a personal translator clipped to her collar, blinking green. "Let's make this quick," she said, as she stepped to the center of the circular arena. "My espresso's cooling." Lord Magistrate, Sarun, more gaunt and frazzled than ever before, slammed the ceremonial baton against the obsidian floor. "You have poisoned our order with chaos, seduced our minds with mockery. Our records will show that we demanded obedience." "And I brought an invitation," Mira interrupted, her voice steady, not flippant. "You rule through fear, tradition, and memory. I represent something else, something you can't predict, control or script into a ritual." Her eyes swept the room. Choice. One by one, screens lit up along the curved chamber wall. Uncensored footage streamed from within the Dominion. Street gatherings where laughter now echoed through markets, once silent. Young officers discussing open-source protocols, once forbidden. Texts being openly read in study halls, and banners bearing fractal emblems quietly unfurled behind guard towers. A virus had spread, not of code or contagion, but of perspective. The fractal accord had launched Phase 2, soft infiltration. Mira had delivered her transmission weeks ago, an information burst encoded into harmonic frequencies and quantum resonance, slipping past every Dominion firewall, embedding itself in the very infrastructure the Dominion relied on for control. And now, that infrastructure was betraying them, not through malfunction, but through curiosity. Every data node, every archive, every teaching module now carried a question. What if it doesn't have to be this way? Mira raised a small device no bigger than her palm. With a tap, it projected a map of Dominion sectors, highlighted and pulsing. Blue were planetary nodes already showing measurable shifts in behavior, relaxation of enforcement, drops in caste-based arrests, unauthorized collaborative forums forming between classes. She didn't need to name the shift. The council could feel it, like a distant quake rolling in beneath ceremonial boots. "You can't stop this," she said softly, "because it isn't me. It's them. Your people are tired. Tired of bowing. Tired of pretending reverence feels the same as respect. You built a fortress around obedience." I just handed out the blueprints and asked who wanted a door. Vox, seated stiffly among the military elite, said nothing, but his gaze never left Mira, and for the first time since their first encounter, his expression didn't hold suspicion. It held something far more dangerous for the Dominion: consideration. Sarun gestured violently toward the guards. "Seize her! End this illusion!" But no one moved. The guards looked at each other. One lowered his rifle. Another took a step back. Mira didn't flinch. "You can rule through fear, sure," she said, shrugging. "But fear's got a shelf life. Truth doesn't." And then, as if punctuating her words, a deep, low hum echoed through the chamber. It wasn't Mira's ship. It was the Dominion's. Planetary net rebooting. All systems shifting to a decentralized model. Her embedded packages had reached full maturation. Civilian terminals, once only capable of receiving official broadcasts, now streamed open-access libraries from the Fractal Accord. Citizen forums bloomed like wildfire across comms infrastructure. In less than a minute, the Dominion's monopoly on truth cracked open like a shell. Sarun staggered back, eyes wide. "You've broken us." "No," Mira said gently, stepping closer. "You broke yourselves by building a society afraid of questions. I just lit the first match." As the council erupted into chaos, some pleading, some weeping, some shouting to restore control, Mira stepped out of the chamber, back into the bright light of Vecron's skybridge. Anelver was waiting. So was Vox. No words were needed. They fell into step beside her. Above them, the sky shifted. Across Dominion space, blue fractals blossomed like stars awakening. Mira Lang, explorer, diplomat, saboteur of systems, didn't look back.